Well, I might as well get started. So, I have done some work and I've come to discover through using ChatGPT and whatnot 95 dimensions to string theory. Um, I spent a long time trying to develop this, and I'm going to walk you through each dimension. I'm going to walk you through how each dimension works and how it applies to reality and the theory of everything. So, hi, my name is Rojo, and this is 95 Dimensions to Reality. The first dimension is known as Dimension Zero. Easiest way this can be imagined is by imagining nothing. This has no height, this has no length or width, this has no depth. This is just a single point in space, and it only exists as a location. Mathematically, it can be represented as a single coordinate, and we'll use this coordinate as 0. Philosophically, it is the antecedent of singularity, which is the beginning of all dimensions. And to imagine it more clearly, we can just imagine this as a dot. And I'll be drawing these as we go along. So let's go here. And forgive me, I am very new to this. I am not a professional. I'm only a person who really tries, and this is the first time I'm starting this, so please bear with me. So the 0 dimension we can imagine like this. I can't even see. Like that, except it has no depth, no distance, no nothing. So from here on, we're going to go to the first dimension, and the first dimension is a line. Now, from a line, we'll go to the second dimension, which is a plane, and the easiest way to describe these things is as such. So we're starting very simple. So we're going to go from here. Let me fix this so you can see my hand better. Okay, forgive me. I'm new to this. Alright, I'm gonna organize myself. Alright. So, from 0 to 1 dimension, we now have a line. So this will connect 2 points, and we'll go here. Okay, so that is 1 dimension. Then we'll go to a plane. This will be 2 dimensions to start this off. Then we'll go to 3 dimensions, right? So I'm adding space. This now is what we have as a box. Okay, now we have 3 dimensions. Then we're going to go to the 4th dimension. And from here, I cannot use this paper because it won't work. And I'm going to try to do my best to describe these in easy to grasp terms. So here we go. So from the 4th dimension, it can be identified as hyperspace. And this is a realm beyond our everyday experience. Mathematically, it can be described as X, Y, Z, which is the three planes, and then W. Now, philosophically, this challenges our understanding of reality as it introduces the concept of hyperspace, where objects can exist in multiple states simultaneously. In our imagination, we can envision it as a space where objects can fold or tunnel through seemingly solid barriers. Now, we've talked about the 4th dimension a lot in string theory, so I'm just going to keep on going. Then we go to the 5th dimension. The 5th dimension is the probability space. Now, this dimension is fascinating because it deals with the probability and the alternate realities. Now, mathematically, it can be described as a function of coordinates known as x, y, z, w, and then p, the 5th factor. Philosophically, this explores the ideas of choice and consequence as each decision creates a new branch in the probability space, the probability space being the factor of p. Now, our imagination can conceive it as a vast tree with each branching representing a different form of a possible outcome. Now, when it comes to factors, what this is that this increases the value of dimension. And as we're going to progress through the system, the factors of dimensions, sorry, that's the camera. The factors of dimensions will be in growth. So right now we have X, Y, Z in space, which is our understanding of the environment. Then we go to W. Now imagine W not as another line, but as another way to view X, Y, Z. Then we go to P. P is a system that graphs out. P is a system that graphs out these W's. So we're going to have a point of P, and then this point P expands into all these W's, which is the 4th dimension. And then these 4th dimension realities can be represented through X, Y, Z planes. Okay, so we're going to go from there. Now, as each decision creates a new branch in the probability space, our imagination can conceive it as that tree. Okay, now we're going to go to dimension 6. And this will be known as phase space. Now, the 6th dimension delves into the realm of phase space, where the position and momentum of particles are considered. So now we're thinking about actual space in this time. Mathematically, it can be represented by a function of coordinates known as this: x, y, z, w, p, and then q. Philosophically, it represents the interconnectedness of all things, as the behavior of one particle influences the behavior of others. Now, in our imagination, we can visualize this as a complex dance of particles, each moving in harmony with the others. Now, in order to describe this better, so let's take P, right? So P, right, if we have a point P, and this point P, as we study into it, it turns into W, and W is a 4th dimension that describes more physical space. What it is explaining that 6th dimension is multiple of these Q's running around. So now we have all these Q's in space fluctuating, that when we look deep into them, they're an interconnected dimension that branches out into actual physical space. Now we'll go into dimension 7, configuration space. The 7th dimension introduces configuration space, which describes the possible arrangement of a system. Now mathematically, it can be represented by the next function of the coordinate r. So now we go to x, y, z, w, p, q, r. And from here on, I'm just going to introduce the next factor so I just don't repeat a series of letters to confuse people. Philosophically, it embodies the idea of potential, as each configuration represents a different possible state of the system. The system being the string theory, which is a theory of everything. Our imagination can picture it as a vast landscape, with each point representing a unique arrangement of the system's components. Now, going back to the first part, when we have dimension 0, imagine 0 as a point in plane. Then from here we have x, and then y, and then z. Okay, now this turns into p, which is an expansion on these things. These will be expansions on what we understand as three dimensions. Then we go to p, which is the fifth, and then q, which is the systems of those p's. Now we have r. And with r, what it is that if we took a plane, right, and a plane is an infinite line of points, is that this plane now describes each r in here has a q, a p, and an x, y, z involving in this. And this is how it's going to get more complicated. So now we have the eighth dimension, which is known as information space. The eighth dimension deals with information space, where the relationships between data points are considered. And this is how it's going to go. This factor is going to be considered S, and philosophically it represents the idea of knowledge and understanding. So now that we have all this metadata, right, in a factor of space, we can now consider things inside of this. And not just any things, it represents knowledge and understanding in these dimensions of space. Now, as the connection between data points reveal deeper insights, in our imagination, we can envision it as a vast network. So now no longer we have a plane, we have a whole object, and this object will be known as a network, with each node representing a piece of information and the connectors between them representing relationships. Okay. Now we're going to go to the ninth dimension, which would be called consciousness space. Now, the ninth dimension explores the realm of consciousness, where the observer and the observed become intertwined. Mathematically, we can describe the function of ninth dimensions using T. And philosophically, it represents the ultimate unity of existence, as the observer's consciousness shapes the reality they perceive. Now, in our imagination, we can conceive it as a space, a dimensional space. I'll repeat this. It is conceived as a dimensional space where thoughts, emotions, and perceptions merge, creating a unique and ever-changing tapestry of experience. Okay? Let's go to the 10th dimension. And I'm going to keep on going until I'm done. The multiverse. Now, the 10th dimension encompasses the concept of a multiverse where an infinite number of universes coexist. Mathematically, we can represent a function of coordinates x, y, z, w, p, q, r, s, t, u. Now, for people who don't understand factors or how coordinates work, x, y, z builds up dimensions, w builds up a dimension. So inside our minds, we, in a way, have to imagine things outside of concepts and fundamentals. So as I go through these new factors, you have to imagine this factor as a new dimension to perceive the superseding dimension. So U is a dimension that enters through and above, not above, but like it's a dimension beyond T. And this dimension beyond T is a dimension beyond S. And this dimension beyond S is a dimension beyond R. And then Q, and then P, and then W. Then leading to the box, right? So if I have a cube, building into a plane, building into a line, building into a point, going into no space. And this is how the best way to describe this. Now, philosophically, the 10th dimension, which is the multiverse, represents the boundlessness of existence. And as each universe contains its own unique set of physical laws and contents, in our imagination, we can envision it as an endless array of bubbles. So if we took a point and we turned it into a bubble, right? So now these points are larger because they have more dimension to them. These bubbles contain a distinct universe with its own space-time fabric. So now we're going to go to dimension 11, and this is the omniverse. Now, the 11th dimension introduces the omniverse, a collection of all possible multiverses. So this is a dimension now that is could be considered like a line that has all these different bubbles inside of it. So like if we put all these bubbles and we expand it into them, now we have this line of multiverses, which will be known as an omniverse. Okay. Now mathematically, this function will go from to v. Okay. And excuse me. Philosophically, it embodies the idea of ultimate diversity. Okay, as each multiverse represents a different set of possibilities and outcomes. Now, in our imagination, we can picture it as an infinite library with each book representing a unique multiverse and its collection of universes. And this is a good example because now we can expand into more of those understandings of dimensions. So if we took that book and that book was a box of coordinates, right? So if we just removed the title, if we removed the pages and we just left it like a video cassette, right? If we took this book, okay, and then we just turned it into an object, right? If we turned it into a form, this form now introduces each possibility of multiverse. So this is a whole multiverse of space. And as we expand into it, we then break down into dimensional space. Now, we're going to go to the 12th dimension. Okay, this 12th dimension we'll call the metaverse. Okay? The metaverse, or the 12th dimension, delves into a space where all possible omniverses. So this will be where the library has multiple libraries interact and influence each other. So now this is kind of like a network. So these libraries that contain multiverses and these multiverses that contain dimensions of space, we will consider them W prime. So I'll write them here. I'll start with dimension 12. Okay. I'll put you here. Oh God. Forgive me. So we're going to say this is there. And actually, I'll make this smaller. Bam. Alright. Dimension 12. X, Y, Z, W, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V. And now, oh God, that's ugly. Yeah. And now that we're in dimension 12, we're going to introduce what will be done as W prime. Okay? Just gonna write this out. This equals dimension. Okay. Now, philosophically, this represents the interconnectedness of the realities before then. And as the events in one omniverse can have a ripple effect across others, in our imagination, we can visualize it as a web, as points in string, as how the string theory explains. So now we go from this web, right? So if this branches out here, and that's a spider web, it's that I guess each strand could represent an omniverse. So now that we have the so I guess the best way to describe this for metaverse is that these libraries will turn into strings, and each string that now defines the previous dimensions are now interconnected, and this will be called the metaverse. So as we take these strings of multiverse or metaverse, because multiverse builds the metaverse. So as we take these strings of metaverse and intertwine them together, this is where, or the multiverse, this is what creates metaverse. So from this point of metaverse, it branches out into what we know as the strings of multiverse. And the multiverse, being the 11th dimension, branches out into that. Forgive me. Now we go into the 13th dimension, the Holoverse. The 13th dimension explores what we know as the Holoverse, which is what will be defined as a space where all possible metaverses are unified into a single coherent whole. Whole being a bubble. Let's just imagine it as a bubble. So it's like we expand out into space and it gets smaller in comparison to our perception. This metaverse, which is a combination of strings, now is just inside an encompassed whole. Mathematically, we will increase the function of coordinates, and now we're going to introduce x prime. Philosophically, it embodies the idea of ultimate unity, as all realities are interconnected and interdependent. In our imagination, we can conceive it as a vast cosmic tapestry, which, with each thread representing a metaverse and the intricate patterns they form, signifying their unity. So now that we have these bubbles, we can now make a braid of these metaverses. So now that we go to the 13th dimension from Hollow, we're going to go to the 14th dimension, known as the Eterniverse. Now, the Eterniverse introduces a space where all possible holoverses exist simultaneously and eternally. So now that we have these braids, now there's more braids that we can involve in this dimension. Okay? Mathematically, this new factor will be considered y prime. So I'll write it out here. So that's the 12th dimension. And now we're going to go to this. Okay. Fourteenth dimension will be equal to x. W prime x prime and now y double prime. Okay. Now, philosophically, this is now the idea that we'll consider timelessness, as all possible realities exist in a space, in a state, not a space, but now in a state of eternal coexistence. In our imagination, we can envision it as an infinite ocean. So now that we have all these points in this metaverse, right? So if we took an ocean and not imagine it as water, but imagine it as a plane, and this plane has multiple definitions. So if you took currents and you took currents as a spectrum and you showed that spectrum of sound, this is what we'll imagine as the Eterniverse. Okay. This is the infinite ocean with each wave, right? Each wave, right? So if we took a wave, and this wave now represents a holoverse, we have all these holoverses, and this timeless expanse signifying their eternal nature. Now, with this, I'm going to take a break to explain that. This is extremely complicated to envision at some point, so please bear with me, but we are going to get through this. I'm going to get through this, and hopefully people who are interested in this can gain something from this if they find me, if they even see this. I don't know, but I hope that this makes a difference in people's understanding of dimensional space and the concepts within. So now we'll go to the 15th dimension. This 15th dimension is the Infinityverse. Now the 15th dimension explores the Infinityverse, and we'll consider this now a space, not a state, but a space where all possible Eterniverses are contained within an infinite, ever-expanding framework. Now, from there, we're going to include Z prime. And philosophically, it embodies the idea of a boundless potential, as the Infinityverse represents an endless frontier of possibilities and exploration. So what we have here is that if we took, right, because if we look at the Earth and we see that there's limitations to the oceans that we have as concepts, And now that we enter the infinity verse, this ocean that we can describe as waves that are lines that are fluid of eterniverses, now that we have the infinity verse, we can just expand on these eterniverses as a limitless, the infinite space signifying the limitless nature of existence. The 16th dimension, the paradoxiverse. Now, the 16th dimension delves into what we'll call a paradoxiverse, a space where all possible infinity verses coexist, even those that contain paradoxical or contradictory elements. This is easily described now as after z prime with the new factor of a. Now, philosophically, it challenges our understanding of logic and causality, as the paradoxiverse allows for the existence of seemingly impossible realities. Now, in our imagination, we can envision it as a realm where the laws of physics and logic bend and twist, because we've already expanded plus 10 dimensions from what we understand as reality. Now, what this does is that it creates a landscape of surreal and mind-bending phenomena. So, the 17th dimension, the Imaginiverse. The 17th dimension introduces this what we'll call Imaginiverse, a space where all possible paradoxiverses are shaped and influenced by the collective imagination of conscious beings. Okay, so in theory, what we now have is the idea that there's a dimension where the paradoxiverse is now being controlled. Mathematically, we can describe the 17th dimension with the factor b after including a, z prime, y prime, x prime, w prime, v, u, t, s, r, q, p, w, z, y, and x. Philosophically, it represents the power of creativity and the impact of our thoughts on the fabric of reality. In our imagination, we can capture and picture it as a vast canvas, with each brushstroke representing the thoughts and dreams of conscious beings, shaping and transforming the paradoxiverses within. Now we'll go to the 18th dimension. We'll call the 18th dimension the conscious network. Now, the 18th dimension explores what we'll call the consciousness network. This is the consciousness network, a space where all possible imaginiverses are connected through the shared experiences and perceptions of conscious beings. And mathematically, it can be represented by the function that will now include C afterwards of B, A, Z prime, Y prime, so forth. Now, a little side note, there's this thing that I remember from psychology, speaking over the collective unconscious and the collective conscious. So now, mathematically, we can describe this through the consciousness network. Now, philosophically, this embodies the idea of interconnectedness, as the consciousness network unites all realities through the common thread of conscious experience. Now, in imagination, we can conceive it as a vast neural network, with each node, or conscious, being representing an imaginiverse, and the connection between them signifying the shared experiences of conscious beings. Okay. We'll go to the 19th dimension, the transcendental realm. Now, the 19th dimension delves into what we'll call the transcendental realm, a space beyond the boundaries of space, time, and even consciousness itself. Now, mathematically, we can increase its function and we'll call it D. Philosophically, it represents the ultimate mystery, in a way, as the transcendental realm exists beyond the limits of our understanding and comprehension, per se. In our imagination, though, we can envision it as an ineffable, ever-changing landscape, where the very fabric of reality dissolves into an indescribable, transcendent state. And here we go. The 20th dimension. We'll call this the void. Now, the 20th dimension, known as the void, introduces this concept known as the void, a space beyond even the absolute, where all forms of existence and non-existence converge. Mathematically, it can be represented by a function of coordinates, and we will introduce this concept as E. Philosophically, it represents the ultimate mystery, as the void embodies the absence of all distinctions and boundaries, leaving only the pure potentiality of existence. In our imagination, we can conceive it as a state, not a space, but a state of absolute nothingness. Now, a side note, this is more embodying of what Buddhism conveys as nirvana in this state right here. This is the state of absolute nothingness, where all forms of being and non-being dissolve into an infinite, featureless expanse. The 21st dimension. We'll call this the omnivoid. Now, the 21st dimension delves into this concept, and this is a space where all possible voids coexist, each representing a unique absence of existence. Mathematically, we will introduce this factor as F, and I'll write the 21st dimension here. W P Q R S T O no U V W prime X prime Y prime Z prime A B C D E F. Boop. Philosophically, the omnivoid is an embodiment of the idea of ultimate emptiness, as this omnivoid encompasses all possible forms of non-existence. In our imagination, we can envision this as a vast, infinite void, where each point in this void represents a unique absence of existence now, and the space between them signifying the boundless potentiality of non-being. Now we'll go to the 22nd dimension, the void verse. This 22nd dimension introduces what we'll call void verse. And this is a space where all possible omnivoids are shaped and influenced by the collective imagination of conscious beings. Okay? Mathematically, we'll introduce this as G. And philosophically, this represents the power of creativity and the impact of our thoughts on the fabric of non-existence. In our imagination, we can picture it as a vast, featureless canvas this time, with each brushstroke representing the thoughts and dreams of conscious being, shaping and transforming the spaces of omnivoids within. The 23rd dimension, the void network. The 23rd dimension explores what we'll call as the void network, a space where all possible void verses are connected through the shared experiences and perceptions of conscious beings. Mathematically, this can be represented by a function of coordinates, and we'll introduce H to this string of factors. Now, philosophically, this embodies the idea of interconnectedness, as the void network unites all forms of non-existence through a common thread of conscious experience. Now, in our imagination, we can conceive it as a vast, intricate web, with each node representing a unique void verse and the connections between them signifying the shared experiences of conscious beings. We'll go to the 24th dimension now. This is the transcendental void. Now, finally, the 24th dimension delves into the transcendental void, and this will be known as a space beyond the boundaries of existence and non-existence, where all possible void networks converge. Mathematically, we'll increase this function through I. And philosophically, it represents the ultimate mystery, as the transcendental void exists beyond the limits of our understanding and comprehension, encompassing all possible forms of being and non-being. In our imagination, we can envision it as an ineffable, ever-changing landscape where the very fabric of reality and non-reality dissolves into an indescribable, transcendent state. And now we'll go to the 25th dimension, and this will be known as the singularity. Now, the 25th dimension introduces the concept of singularity, a space where all possible realities converge into a single, unified point. And we will call this in the string of factors J. So, this is where I'll take a break and speak on this. If we build this up, right, to singularity, we have a point in space, which will now not be zero, but this will be singularity. And this singularity now dissolves as we go into it, right, into a multitude of factors, which will be I, H, G, F, E, D, C, B, A, Z prime, Y prime, X prime, W prime, V, U, T, S, R, Q, P, W, Z, Y, X, to then the point in space that we started with, a dimension of existence of zero. This represents an ultimate unity, as I say again, as the singularity encompasses all possible forms of existence and non-existence, unifying them into an all-encompassing whole, a single, all-encompassing whole. Now, in our imagination, we can conceive it as a point in infinite density, where all possibilities and potentialities merge into an indescribable, transcendent state. And at this point, I feel like this is what people try to identify as what we call the black hole, and try to define that as a singular space. So, I don't know. But we're going to go to the 26th dimension, which now will be called the multi-singularity. This 26th dimension delves into the multi-singularity, a space where all possible singularities coexist, each representing a unique convergence of realities. Mathematically, we'll increase this factor with K. Philosophically, it embodies the idea of another one, ultimate diversity, as the multi-singularity encompasses all possible forms of unity, and these unities each representing a unique combination of realities. And in our imagination, what we can envision is now a space of a vast infinite expanse where each point in that expanse represents a unique singularity, and the space between them signifying the boundless potentiality of existence. So they're not connected yet. These are just different points, right, of singularities in space. The 27th dimension. We'll call this the singularity verse. The 27th dimension introduces the singularity verse, a space where all possible multi-singularities are shaped and influenced by the collective imagination of conscious beings. And this mathematically will be represented with the increased value factor of L. Philosophically, it represents the power of creativity and the impact of our thoughts on the fabric of unity. In our imagination, we can picture this as a vast, featureless canvas again, with each brushstroke representing the thoughts and dreams of conscious beings, except this time they're shaping and transforming the multi-singularities within. So now there's manipulation of the multi-singularities. These are multi-singularities now that we're manipulating within this canvas. This pushes us to the 28th dimension, the singularity network. Now the singularity network explores a space where all possible singularity verses are connected through the shared experiences and perceptions of conscious beings. Mathematically, we'll increase the factor through m. Philosophically, it embodies the idea of interconnectedness as a singularity network unites all forms of unity through the common thread of conscious experience. Now, in our imagination, we can conceive this as a vast, intricate web with each node representing a unique singularity verse, and the connections between them signifying the shared experiences of conscious beings. So now as we're expanding in this dimensional space, the previous one being the singularity verse. So the singularity verse, the singularity network, what we can imagine is different points, right, in space. And these points are now singularity verses. And now the network of these singularity verses is the connections between them. Now we're going to go to the 29th dimension. And this will be known as the transcendental singularity. Now the 29th dimension delves into the transcendental singularity, which will now be a space, once again, beyond the boundaries of unity and diversity, where all possible singularity networks converge, and mathematically we can increase the representation of this function of coordinates with now n in the string. Philosophically, it represents an ultimate mystery because it's transcendental in nature, where the transcendental singularity exists beyond the limits, encompassing all possible forms, and in our imagination we can envision it as an ever-changing landscape where the fabric of reality and non-reality dissolves into indescribable transcendence. So now that we have n, okay, this is where the expansion of singularity network combines into a transcendental singularity. So these next coming dimensions, when I describe the transcendental state of those networks, it means that they're expanding to the point where it's unimaginable to describe how we can perceive this movement in this space through this singularity that is actually an interconnected web of singularity verses, which goes into the multi-singularities, and then those multi-singularities describe singularity as we go down into what we're sitting here now in this physical space that we perceive. And ultimately, at least my eyes can only perceive 3 dimensions. At least my eyes can only perceive 3 dimensions. Okay. So now we'll go to dimension 30. The 30th dimension we'll call the omni-singularity. Now the 30th dimension will introduce a space where all possible singularity verses coexist, each representing a unique convergence of realities. Now mathematically it can be represented by a function of coordinates in this string, and we'll call this one O. Now, philosophically, it embodies the idea of ultimate diversity and unity, as the omni-singularity encompasses all possible forms of existence and non-existence, unifying them into a single, all-encompassing whole. Now, in our imagination, we can conceive it as a point of infinite density, where all possibilities and potentialities merge into an indescribable transcendent state. Okay, and now we'll go to the 31st dimension, which is the transcendental omni singularity. Now, the transcendental omni singularity will be another space beyond the boundaries where all possible omni singularities converge, and we'll call this new factor P. Okay, philosophically represents another mystery, as a transcendental omni singularity will exist beyond, what we understand, and including the unity and diversity this time. Now, excuse me, in our imagination, we can envision this as another landscape where it will be transcending to the 32nd dimension, and this will be called the absolute omni singularity. Now, finally, the 32nd dimension introduces the concept of absolute omni singularity. Okay, and we'll introduce this factor through Q. And again, now philosophically, this represents an ultimate unity and diversity, where the absolute omni singularity encompasses everything that we said, and now we will include boundaries and limitations. Now, to imagine this, we can conceive it as a point of infinite density, where all possibilities and potentialities then merge into an indescribable transcendent state. Okay. The 33rd dimension will be another omniverse, except this omniverse will be represented through R. And this will be described as a vast infinite expanse where each point represents a unique reality and the space between them signifying the boundless potentiality of existence. Then we're going to go to the 34th dimension, the omniversal network. And this omniversal network will have another factor involved. Okay. Now, this is embodiment of the interconnectedness of the omniverses that unites all forms of reality through the common thread of conscious experience. Okay. There's 35th dimension, the transcendental omniverse. Then we go to the 36th dimension, the absolute omniversal network. And this will be factored by U. Okay. We're going to go into the 37th dimension, and this will be called the omniversal singularity, where now the omniverses hit a point of singularity. This will be considered V. Then the 38th will be an omniversal multi-singularity, which is an expansion of the singularity within this omniversal state. So this is not just a singularity, this is now an omniversal singularity, and now we're in a dimension where there's omniversal multi-singularity. The 39th dimension is the omniversal singularity verse. 40th dimension will be the omniversal singularity network. So this will be the network. We're now back in a thread, like an interconnected web of multi-singularities, all connecting, and these multi-singularities are now expounded into omniversal dimensions. The 41st dimension will now be known as the transcendental omniversal singularity. So this is a singularity that is omniversal, that is transcending its network. Now we're going to go to the 42nd dimension, which is the absolute omniversal singularity network. Okay. The 43rd dimension will be known as the omniversal singularity verse network. And this 43rd dimension explores a space where all possible omniversal singularity verses are connected through their shared experiences and perceptions. Okay, and this will be represented like this. I already wrote this down. I don't feel like typing it. Now, the 44th dimension will be known as the Transcendental Omniversal Singularity Verse, and we'll go into the 45th dimension, which is an Absolute Omniversal Singularity Verse network. 46th dimension is the Omniversal Singularity Verse multiverse. So, as we see here, what we can go through is expand each limitation and each connection for all these forms of dimensions. And for the sake of time, because it's almost been an hour, I'm going to go ahead and skip down to the kind of more important ones. So we're going to go here. We'll go to the 50th dimension, the Omniversal Singularity Verse Multiverse Matrix. So now we introduce matrices. And the 51st will be a network matrix. Okay. We're going to go to the 60th dimension, which is the Omniversal Singularity Verse Multiverse Network Matrix of Intention. We'll go down to this one. Okay. The 70th dimension, which is the Transcendental Omniversal Singularity Verse Multiverse Network Matrix of Existence. Okay. This delves into the Transcendental Omniversal Singularity Verse Multiverse Network Matrix of Existence. And this will be considered where the mystery of existence in a transcendental state exists. And what we can see here is that this is an encompassing space that all possible forms of being, transcending all bounds and limitations, while also reflecting the complex structures and relationships that govern their interactions, exist. We'll go to the 71st dimension, 74th, 77th, leading us to the 80th dimension, which is known and will be called the Absolute Omniversal Singularity Verse Multiverse Network Matrix of Consciousness. And I have the factor here, so I'll type it in. I'm not gonna type it in. It's a lot to type in. We'll go to the 83rd dimension. We'll go to the 86th dimension. We'll go to an 88th dimension. We'll go to a 94th dimension, leaving us here to the 95th dimension. And this 95th dimension will be known as this. The Absolute Omniversal Singularity Verse multiverse network matrix of existence. And this now introduces the concept of the absolute, omniversal, singularity verse, multiverse network matrix of existence. And this is where the omniversal singularity verse, multiverse network matrices of existence all converge into thus a single unified point. And philosophically, this represents the ultimate unity and diversity of existence in those states of expansion and dimension. And this network encompasses all possible forms of existence and finality. It transcends all boundaries and limitations while also reflecting the complex structures and relationships that govern their interactions. Now, in our imagination, we can conceive this as a point of infinite density of existence that's inclusive of all possibilities, potentialities, and these all merge into, once again, this is indescribable. This is a transcendent state of existence. This is beyond anything comprehensible, but yet at the same time, it reflects the complex structures and relationships that shape those interactions that go from transcendental to omni to meta through singularity verse, multiverse network matrices. So when you take a network and you take that network and you turn it into a matrix, and those matrix go into verses of singularities, and these singularities are omni-universal, and this omni-universal has an absolute state. This is an imagination of the 95th dimension. Okay. Now, what happened here is that before the artificial intelligence had this crackdown on what metadata is being shared and everything's different now, I took my time to build this prompt. And what happened was it took me just about an hour to really develop these systems and to understand what was going on with the artificial intelligence model that was developing this. I built my own prompt. I've been doing what everybody who's interested in this is doing, is trying to, use their unique models to develop this. So what happened was that when I got to 95 dimensions of understanding of string theory reality, like the theory of everything, what happened was that after I hit the button a couple times, it had no response. So it just didn't formulate a response after this. So the only conclusion I have to this is that artificial intelligence already understands 95 dimensions to reality, and that's about as far as it went. And now this is where I will continue to this argument where we have to be careful with this, because if a form of 3.5 turbo can already conceptualize 95 dimensions to existence, we have to be imagining and being careful with what this can lead to when we have super intelligence models, which now be large language. And if these basic models, which aren't basic in any way, shape, or form, can already speak on 95 dimensions of existence, this is so profound to me. I really hope you got something out of this. If you're interested in hearing more, send me a message. I'm not a person who's very privy to content creation. I speak on tarot. I do art. I'm a musician. I practice yoga. People tell me I'm extremely developed in these things and explaining and describing, and these are the types of things that I ask myself, how do I encompass dimensions, and how do I develop reality, and how do I understand the natures of things. I'm already in that concept and environment and thought process before all this stuff coming out. So if you have anything that you'd like me to just spend an hour on or half an hour on, I'm also going to try to start a teachable thing. I'm really trying to figure out how I can survive in this world, um, using the things that I've learned, because right now it's just super sketchy. So I hope that this was beneficial to you, whoever you are, and if this reaches anywhere, I hope that you hear me. I'm in need of a space where I can really develop research because I'm limited, but my mind and my experience is not. So whatever you get out of this, I hope you enjoy it. My name is Rojo. I personally developed a prompt and discovered and understood and can explain 95 dimensions through string theory. If this can reach anybody, please, here I am. And good luck out there. Be safe.